Where is Dark Sister, that legendary Valyrian steel sword of House Targaryen? Will it make an appearance in the Winds of Winter? And who will wield it? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. On this channel we cover A Song of Ice and Fire in depth, as well as other great fantasy worlds like The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher. Welcome. Dark Sister is one of the most legendary swords in Westeros. It's a slender, one-handed blade, seemingly originally made for a woman or someone without the strength or inclination to wield a two-handed or bastard sword. Forged in Valyria before the Doom and presumably brought to Dragonstone when the Targaryens fled there, we first hear of it in the possession of Visenya Targaryen, Aegon the Conqueror's elder sister and wife. She uses it during the conquest and after, often to protect Aegon personally. She gave it to her son Maegor. Charis used it when claiming the Iron Throne, and he gave it to Balon the Brave, then Prince Daemon. After him, Aemon the Dragon Knight and then Bloodraven both wielded it. That's quite a list, of both the great and the good of Targaryen history, Charis, Balon, Aemon, and the undeniably charismatic and powerful, but perhaps more morally questionable, Maegor, Visenya, Daemon, and Bloodraven himself, of course. Not the Sword of Kings, that was Blackfire, and both Maegor and Charis set aside Dark Sister for that when they were king, but the sword often given to the most exceptional Targaryen of their age. A sword used not just as a symbol, but in combat. And whereas Blackfire, as that great symbolic Sword of Kings, went missing after the First Blackfire Rebellion, Dark Sister remained in Targaryen hands. Bloodraven held it as a staunch defender of Diren II, then perhaps the most powerful ever Targaryen Hand of the King for much of the next 4 decades. But then it too vanishes from history. The last 100% canon sighting we have is from Dunk's youth, when he sees it at a Bloodraven's side when he rides into King's Landing. But wonderfully, we do have one more semi-canon hint from George R.R. Martin himself, courtesy of friends of this channel, History of Westeros. When Aegon V, Egg, ascended to the Iron Throne, he banished Bloodraven to the Wall for reasons that I discussed in a previous video. What happened then to Dark Sister remained a mystery for some time. But some years ago, at a Q&A event, Ashaya from History of Westeros asked George R.R. Martin a straightforward question. Did Bloodraven take Dark Sister with him to the Wall? And rarely for George R.R. Martin, he gave a straight answer. Yes. Why was he allowed to take such a precious sword to the Wall? Well, again, that's discussed in that other video. But the important point here is that our new last sighting of Dark Sister is with Bloodraven as he joins the Night's Watch in the year 233 AC. So what then? Well, we can probably assume that it stayed with Bloodraven in Castle Black during his time there. New recruits are allowed to keep personal possessions as long as they fit in with the Night's Watch ethos and colour scheme. Note the rather fine black cloak, gloves and so on that Waymar Royce has got in the prologue to Book 1, as well as the rather fancy bejewelled longsword he has. He wasn't made to swap that for one forged at the Wall. So Bloodraven presumably kept Dark Sister as a Night's Watchman, then also after he was elected Lord Commander in 239, and right up to when he disappeared in 252 AC. Because yes, Bloodraven disappeared while on a ranging north of the Wall. We obviously know now where he ended up, hooked up to the Weirwood network in a cave with the Children of the Forest far to the north, but no one else in the story knew then, or now, other than obviously now Bran and co, although Bran, understandably perhaps for a 9 or 10-year-old, hasn't really engaged with the idea of exactly who this strange tree wizard is. Anyway, at this point Dark Sister disappears from history. We know that Bloodraven used Dark Sister in combat, not just for show, so it makes sense that he took it with him on that ranging. But let's briefly consider the idea that maybe he left it there in his chambers in Castle Black. Once it became known that he had disappeared, it seems very likely that the Targaryens in King's Landing would have wanted it back. At this point, the sword Blackfire was long gone, so Dark Sister was the only ancestral sword they had left. But the Targaryens clearly don't now have it, so maybe Bloodraven hid it somewhere and no one has found it. Perhaps, but it seems unlikely. Or perhaps, as some have suggested, it has resurfaced as Longclaw, now Jon Snow's sword. I like the idea, but sadly it's a non-starter. Longclaw and Dark Sister are very different weapons. The former is a bastard sword, tapered with 3 incisors, and the latter a slender longsword designed for a woman's hand. John has to wear Longclaw on his back because of its length, whereas we see Dark Sister on Bloodraven's hip. Furthermore, Longclaw has apparently been with the Mormonts for centuries, and Bloodraven left for the wall less than 70 years before the start of A Song of Ice and Fire, and they are both very famous swords, so people would know the difference. And for this to work, you'd need Jeor Mormont, Maester Aemon, Donal Noy, and perhaps dozens more Night's Watchmen to be in on the plot for no apparent reason. No, they are different swords. So, given Dark Sister seems not to be at the wall, it must have gone north of the wall with Bloodraven. Might he have lost it somewhere on his travels? We don't know, but he clearly survived through to that cave under the weirwood tree, and is even still wearing the ragged remains of his Night's Watch clothes, so it seems likely that his sword made it too. All of which leads to the working hypothesis that Bloodraven had Dark Sister with him all the way through to becoming the Three-Eyed Crow. The question is it still there in that cave? Tree wizards don't really have much use for swords, and the children of the forest don't use steel, so presumably it would be just lying around somewhere. I'll do a much longer video sometime soon about Bloodraven's master plan, but he does definitely seem to be trying to equip John, the Night's Watch, the Starks, and anyone else on their side to stand against the others. The direwolves, the cache of dragonglass, and the Horn of Winter all seem to be from him. His emissary Cold Hands helped Sam and Gilly get south of the wall, and now he is training Bran. Surely he will therefore want them to have this Valyrian steel sword. Most fans are expecting Bran to head back south at some point in the next couple of books, and maybe he will be gifted Dark Sister before he goes. Not that Bran himself is the best person to use it, so perhaps Maura will be the next owner of Dark Sister. As a complete aside, I do wonder whether there was a nod to this idea on the TV show. When Maura is rushing to escape the cave, she noticeably grabs a sword that was propped up against a cave wall on her way out. The show didn't make anything of that. Dark Sister and Blackfire aren't really mentioned, but perhaps it was a little nod to the idea that Bran and co will take Dark Sister with them when they go. You could certainly argue the case that Maura herself is a Dark Sister to Jojen. Or if she makes it back to Winterfell, there are other potential Dark Sisters who could take that role. Arya immediately springs to mind. Imagine her with a Valyrian steel sword. Or might we even have a female dragon-riding Targaryen, Daenerys, echoing Visenya, taking ownership of it? Intriguing possibilities, to be sure, but a long way into the future of the story, and other than pleasing rhetorical and literary echoes, without much evidence to back them up yet. And I suspect that we have a better person to hold the weapon already in Bloodraven's cave. Hodor. In Fire Cannot Kill a Dragon, George R. R. Martin is quoted as saying this about the Hodor Hold the Door incident, which is basically now confirmed as coming from him, but with a twist. "It's harder to explain in a show," he says. "I thought they executed it very well, but there are going to be differences in the book. They did it very physical, hold the door with Hodor's strength. In the book, Hodor has stolen one of the old swords from the crypt. Bran has been warging into Hodor and practicing with his body, because Bran had been trained in swordplay. So telling Hodor to hold the door is more like hold this pass, defend it when enemies are coming, and Hodor is fighting and killing them. A little different, but the same idea. Bran has been practicing skin-changing into Hodor and fighting as him, with that rusty old sword from the crypts. But Hodor dropped that sword outside the cave when he picked up Jojen. So how will he fight and kill his enemies in that doorway, as George R. R. Martin suggests? Bran has been exploring those caves as Hodor, so might he find a Valyrian steel sword just lying around somewhere? What if Hodor holds off the enemies with Dark Sister, buying those precious moments that Maura and Bran need to escape? Perhaps we could even go as far as to speculate that Bloodraven foresaw all this through the Weirwood network. Perhaps that's why he didn't get Cold Hands, or whoever it was, to pass Dark Sister onto the Night's Watch in that bundle of dragonglass and the old warhorn. Perhaps he knew that the sword would be needed against the others to help Bran escape. It would make Hodor, overlooked and underappreciated, the last wielder of Dark Sister, after that long line of so famous and notable owners. Visenya, Maegor, Jaehaerys, Baelor, Daemon, Aemon the Dragon Knight, Bloodraven, and finally Hodor, without whose sacrificial contribution perhaps Bran wouldn't escape, and perhaps the whole of Westeros would fall. It's an intriguing and tragic possibility. Bittersweet, even. If you'd like more videos like this digging into George R. R. Martin's world, there's a link to my playlist appearing now on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, thank you, there's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.